Good afternoon, Detroit Sports Nation. Wait for a couple of you guys to get in here. Off top, I want to say go listen to the Sports Carnage podcast. We got the link in the description here for Detroit Sports Nation. The Sports Carnage podcast. You can find that on Apple Podcasts. You can find that on Podbean, and you can find it on Spotify. So go listen to that, and then obviously follow us on Facebook right there, Twitter, everything else. So now that that's out the way, we're here to talk about the Western Michigan game. Sorry, something on TV caught my eye. It was obviously a dominant win for Michigan. The balance that they had on offense was it was impressive. Now I don't know if they had that balance because it was Western Michigan, but obviously running the ball is something that they want to do, and they showed that today. They had 333 rushing yards, and a ton of guys got carries. Honestly, you had Blake Corum get 14 carries. AJ Henning got one that he broke for a 74-yard touchdown. Roman Wilson got one that he also broke for 40 yards. Hassan Haskins had a bunch of carries. Even Donovan Edwards got in the mix there, and looked pretty good. 6 carries, 27 yards. Leon Franklin, Dan Villari, and then obviously the quarterbacks had some carries as well. But they wanted to run the football, and it's something that they absolutely did. And as far as their passing game goes, J.J. McCarthy, if you were watching that late into the game, because it was kind of, over at that point, he had a really fun touchdown pass. I think it was 69 yards, I think, to... Let me see here. Sorry. But he, escaped out the pocket, threw kind of across his body, and had Dan Orlovsky going wild. Who did he throw it to? Oh, Dalen Baldwin. There it is. Yep, one catch, 69 yards, one touchdown. So the biggest story for Michigan coming out of this game, though, is an unfortunate one. It's not about any of their play. It's about Ronnie Bell and him, going to the sideline. I believe it was in the first quarter, where it looked like he got rolled up on a punt return. He didn't walk off the field on his own power, and then he was taken to the locker room, on a cart. So no news has come out of that yet. Obviously, he didn't return to the game, but that's Michigan's top receiver, and if he is gone for the year, that's obviously a big blow. But especially considering, you still have Cade McNamara, who he played in some games last year, but he doesn't really have a lot of experience under his belt. So, you take away the top target. That is, it's going to be a bummer to see how long he's out, and you obviously just hope that it's not too serious. Because even today, with the one catch that he did have, the touchdown, he's still Michigan's leading receiver. He had 76 yards, and nobody else had over 69. And he had a hell of a catch, too, that got called back because of offensive pass interference. There was like a one-handed catch on the sideline. It was crazy. Derek says, I'm still worried about our defensive line, and the offensive line is perfect. I probably wouldn't say that the offensive line is perfect, and you have reason to worry about the defensive line, but you still have one of the best defensive linemen in the country on your defensive line, which obviously always helps. And I don't think, really, regardless of what happened today, unless Michigan just got absolutely pushed around, you weren't going to get a good feel for what the defensive line is capable of, right? Because if they come out and they just dominate Western Michigan's offensive line, you say, well, no, duh, that's what's supposed to happen. Obviously, the test will be next week against Washington to see where really both sides of the trenches come and kind of come together. And Jason says, come on, they dominated Western Michigan. They did, but unfortunately that's not the big story, right? We all assume that they dominate Western Michigan. Now, they covered the spread, so anybody in here that put a bet on Michigan, they covered the spread pretty comfortably. And maybe after the first quarter where it was 10-7, you were a little bit nervous maybe, especially after Western Michigan's first drive where they went and just kind of moved the ball down the field and got whatever they wanted. They were helped on that first drive, though, by a not a roughing the passer, but an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty from somebody on Michigan taunting. Yeah, Justin says no one knows about Bell. We don't know exactly the severity of it, but you can obviously tell it doesn't look good, and it's probably a safe bet that he's not going to be back next week at Washington, which is a game that you need him for, right? It's not like you're playing Western Michigan and then Youngstown State and then you're playing Northwestern or something. So we don't know the severity of Bell's injury and if it's going to keep him out for how long. But if you can't walk off on the field and you're getting carted back, it's probably it's probably not going to heal itself within a week, and that's that's a bummer. But I'm sure you guys will stay glued to whatever news source you prefer, Facebook, Twitter, to find out about kind of exactly what happened with Ronnie Bell. But to the actual kind of game plan part of it, again, Michigan looked really effective running the ball, which I'm sure a lot of Michigan fans like to see, because that is what they want to do. That's how they want to build the offense. I believe it was Josh Gaddis that came out with a quote. It was either Gaddis or Harbaugh, basically saying about Cade McNamara is he doesn't have to go out there and win us games. He just has to go out there and be a leader and kind of put guys in the right position, and that's what you saw today. Right, Cade obviously played pretty well, but he only threw 11 passes. Right, now of those 11 that he threw, he completed 9 for 136 yards and 2 touchdowns. So very, very efficient work from Cade on that aspect. But kind of like in the opener last year with Joe Milton, you didn't really see Joe Milton need to do a lot, and that was the case today. When Cade was called upon to make some plays, he was able to, but I don't know that we have a really good sense for what's going to happen in some of these tighter spots, and next week will be a real litmus test for if you still have questions about Michigan, which I'm sure you do. I think next week can go a long way in answering a lot of those questions, and then I think 2 weeks after that they play Wisconsin. Still too predictable on offense. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. It might have looked like it today. But at the same time, you're playing Western Michigan. And again, next week you have Washington. So you don't want to unload, your full playbook, and give, Washington everything that you want to do on camera. So, a little bit of a vanilla play style or a vanilla playbook from Michigan was probably expected today. As long as the game kind of unfolded the way I thought, many people probably thought that it would unfold, where Michigan would come out and they would just dominate them and they wouldn't really have anything to worry about, which is kind of what happened. Right now, if Michigan somehow got down 21-10, 21-7, you might have seen a little bit more creativity on offense. But I mean, you saw they had their backups in. Obviously, McCarthy got in. Donovan, we just talked about all these people who had carries for Michigan. I think they had like 10 different guys who had a carry today. So I would have expected them to be, a little bit too predictable on offense today, and for it to not matter just because of, the talent disparity that's between the Wolverines and the Broncos. Look like NFL preseason. I actually think it's a pretty good comparison. Teams again don't want to show too much. They're not emptying the clip on offense when they have a game like this, right? If the Michigan-Washington game was today, you probably would have seen a completely different game plan from Michigan in terms of like the designs of their plays. I think again they're going to want to run the ball. That's not going to stop. And if you're in a game this year where Michigan's throwing 50 passes, it's probably a game that they're losing and they're throwing because they're trying to catch up, just because that's not the way they want to play. But everybody already, kind of knew that. I don't think anybody expected Michigan to come out here and look like, Texas Tech or something. So as far as the defense went, they were able to hold Western Michigan pretty much at bay. I know Western Michigan got that touchdown, late in the fourth quarter, and that touchdown drive that they had in the first quarter again was aided by the personal foul penalty. And you probably thought in the first quarter that Western Michigan was able to get things a little bit too easy. But the rest of the game, I mean, Michigan was swarming to the ball. They were all over the place. That first drive, too, that Western Michigan scored, one of their receivers had like a really nice catch. On a well-defended play, he just made a great catch over the cornerback. So, that's 7 points right there that with that penalty, with that catch, those things happen in a football game, but that's not typical. So not that you're going to take those 7 points off the board, but I think you can take them with a grain of salt. And then at the end, where at this point you're just trying not to get anybody else hurt, like you saw Ronnie Bell get hurt, earlier in the game. They didn't force any turnovers, right? There are actually no turnovers at all in the game, no fumbles lost, no interceptions thrown, and Western Michigan did actually edge Michigan in time of possession, which is kind of funny with how much Michigan ran the ball. I would say to that though, Michigan had a ton of like big returns, which obviously if you're setting up shop at the 40-yard line and Western Michigan is starting and they have 80 yards to go, you're going to go 40 in a way quicker amount of time than they're going to go 80, and those drives are just going to be quicker in general. Would have been 3rd and 17. Not really. They are off the field without that penalty. So again, those things happen in a football game, right? There's going to be a personal foul in every single game that you watch this year. It's just at different times it can affect you in different ways. That one you would have been off the field, but it happens, right? Guys are going to make plays. Guys are going to get excited, and then there are penalties that probably could have been called that weren't on both sides. So unless you get something that's like really drastic and affecting, or if it was a closer game, I think you might have a bigger beef. If it's a game against Washington or Ohio State or something like that, one of these big games where really every call is important. In a game like this, and it was a close game at the time, obviously, because it was Western Michigan's first drive, but it's just, I don't know. It doesn't really matter in the long run. But to your point, they kind of easily could have pitched a shutout if they took probably that fourth quarter defense a little bit more seriously, and if that 15-yard penalty didn't happen. TOP is a misnomer here due to chunky plays. Yeah, man. That's kind of what we said. I think TOP, just in general, is kind of a silly football stat to measure like how much someone controlled the game, because you have chunk plays, right? So if you're taking 90 yards out to grind a drive and only get a field goal out of it, and then I can get an 80-yard touchdown, I had a way better drive, but your drive took 7 minutes and mine took 30 seconds. So I do think it's a little bit silly, and it's still pretty close, right? It's basically 32 minutes to 28 minutes. So it's not one of those games where one team had the ball for 42 minutes and you had it for, 18 or something like that. But third down, if you were going to be concerned about an area on the defense, maybe you'd want your third down defense to be a little bit better against Western. They were 8 of 17 on third down, which isn't great, but if you're looking at some of those Don Brown defenses of the past, especially in these early season games where Michigan was shutting their opponents down, a lot of times that third down efficiency would be like 2 of 16, which you're obviously more comfortable with than 8 of 17. But on the flip side, they're 8 of 13 on offense, 1 for 1 on fourth down, which I did appreciate Harbaugh going for that fourth down there. I believe it was a 4th and 2. And that's something that I think he's always been pretty good at in, when you're kind of on that side of the field in, maybe even fringe field goal range, just going for it because you're probably going to get it, especially when the opponent is inferior and you can just kind of run the ball straight at them and there's not going to be anything that they're going to be able to do to stop you. And the secondary is a concern. I'd say, yeah, there wasn't anything in this game that I was like, that's alarming for the secondary, like there was, in the Michigan State game last night, even though Michigan State ended up winning by a ton of points too. There are a couple plays where the Northwestern receivers got behind Michigan State's defensive backs. So that's not something that you want to see. I didn't really see anything like that in this game, but I think Michigan's secondary is a concern because they were a concern last year. So this game didn't add to that concern for me, but it also didn't do anything to make me say, oh, that's totally washed out. And honestly, nothing was going to do that because I didn't, obviously I didn't trust Western Michigan's offense, and I didn't think their quarterback had a great day. Apparently, he's a pretty good quarterback though, and one of the better ones in the MAC conference. That's a conference name, right? The MAC. I think so. Yeah, Ball State, Akron Central. Okay, yeah. I just hadn't really known anything about him before the game started, and he played pretty bad, I thought. We don't have a shutdown corner. You don't, but Dax Hill is nice. Not that he's a shutdown corner, but he's somebody who is in your secondary, and that just kind of comes with the with the territory of a long football season. Hopefully somebody develops, and the secondary still, again, it might be a concern because it was last year, but I think you'd have to be, excited about the fact, maybe not excited because it was so bad last year, but, you at least have to know that it's not going to be that bad again. There's really kind of no possible way for any facet of what Michigan did last year to somehow be better than anything that's going to happen this year. And that's not even to say that, this will be a great team moving forward. But you'll see a much better product, I think, literally everywhere on the field than you did last year. LB was third in QBR Nation last year. He can play. And that's what they kept saying on the broadcast. I thought Dan Orlovsky did a pretty good job on the call. Like I said, he went crazy over that J.J. McCarthy play, which was pretty funny to see, or rather pretty funny to hear, I should say. And, I kept hearing that Ellerby was good. I didn't see it today, but that just might be a credit to the Michigan defense. I thought on the first drive, even the drive that they scored on, he had some passes that were, just like wide and high. Maybe that was just jitters, playing your first game of the season, obviously going on the road to the big house after a year of playing probably not in front of many fans. I don't know the rules that the MAC went by. So, you went from 0 fans last year to 109,000 or whatever the count ended up being. So maybe it's a little bit unfair to say, to say that he played bad in those circumstances. I just didn't see it with him today, but that could have just been because, Michigan got to him early. And then when you're playing from behind, down 20 points basically the entire game, it's pretty hard to play quarterback. JJ is going to need more reps. Yeah, he had the weird fumble backwards pass. He's going to need more reps. He's probably not going to play a whole lot this year. When he does get in those spots, I think it's going to be because he played, basically what happened today, right, where Michigan's just up by a lot. So they bring in JJ to get him some of those reps. And I do like that they brought him in and they didn't just make him hand the ball off. He did throw the ball 6 times. Obviously, he had that big touchdown play. So I do like that they're getting him reps to where it's going to look like, a semblance of actual offense for when he inevitably takes over, whether it's next year, 2 years, whatever the timeline is. But if he starts any games this year, it's probably because McNamara got hurt, which is obviously not something you want, especially if he's going to be playing without Ronnie Bell, which we still don't know about that injury. But that's kind of what we have. I don't really think a whole lot to talk about because it was a game against Western Michigan, and Michigan played how you wanted them to, right? They didn't really come out and have one of these crazy like Mark D'Antonio games where you're beating what's that team's name? It'll come to me. But say, you're playing Fordham like Nebraska is, and you only end up winning 21-7 or something. Like, then you might have a reason for concern. But Michigan came out and they dominated the game the way that at least you wanted to see. So we'll know a lot more next week. Next week will be a way more, hyped up and important game. than this week was. But as a tune-up for Washington, it was a fine game. It was a fine performance. And I do think the biggest takeaway is just kind of waiting on the Ronnie Bell news, because if he is out for any amount of time, that's going to be a huge blow to Michigan, especially with some of these early games coming up. Obviously Washington, and then Wisconsin in just a couple weeks. So you really hope it's not serious, and you hope that he can get back sooner rather than later. But that is all we have today. I am Ryan from the Sports Carnage Podcast. Again, the link to our podcast Facebook page is right in the the description of this video, so you can go right there and follow us there. Make sure you give us a like, and then you can find us wherever you are listening to podcasts already, right? Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, you name it, we got it. Just type in Sports Carnage, follow us there. Obviously subscribe, make sure that you have your alerts for not only the Sports Carnage Podcast, but the Detroit Sports Nation Facebook post. So that way, when that Ronnie Bell news does break, or Harbaugh maybe makes a change to the starting lineup for the Washington game or something, you'll see it here on Detroit Sports Nation first. As long as you have those Facebook notifications, that will tell you, boom, Detroit Sports Nation posted, Ronnie Bell out X amount of weeks. It's just a really efficient way to get all your news, and then you can share it to your friends. And I don't know, maybe steal some of the takes you see. Who's to say? But I am Ryan Griffin with Sports Carnage Podcast. Thank you all for sitting here and chatting with me, especially you, Charles. It was a fun back and forth. I appreciated that. And this video will be on our Sports Carnage Facebook page. Our Sports Carnage YouTube page, so follow that as well. If you missed any part of the video, I think we've been here about 20 minutes or so. It will be there in a matter of like a half hour. So if you missed any part of that, you can go back on there and watch it. And then we will see you next week. Thank you.